Hi, I'm Somer Hackley,
Hi, I'm Zen Mac. This is the Art of Search Hiring Manager series.
and these are stories and insights about all things hiring. Well, Zen, as always, it is so great to see you. Thanks for joining me again this week.
Hello.
All right. Well, today I wanted to introduce you to Abbey Perkins. So, Abby is the CIO at StoneX and a member of the executive committee. She has over 20 years of experience in senior technology and financial roles. So, she's been a CIO, a CFO, a management consultant, and CPA. I have to give a big thank you to Darcy Zolpo for introducing us. So, I worked
Sure.
with Abby. I've seen her in action as a hiring manager, and I have to say, I'm sorry to butter you up, Abby, but she sets the bar very high. And I mean, seriously, like I have worked with other clients since working with Abby, and I've thought to myself, what would Abby do in this situation? And if I had to sum, it's
Wow,
true.
we're gonna
No,
get
it's the
bracelets written, done up.
it's the truth. But this is why, if I have to sum it up, I'd say what strikes me is how honest, straightforward, decisive, and clear she is. And that is not easy. Not many people truly embody those things, especially when it comes to hiring. So, anyway, without further ado, Abby, it is so great to see you here today. Thanks for joining us.
You as well. Well, thank you for having me.
Of
Hello,
course.
Abby.
Hello, Zen.
Would it be more like appropriate to be WWAD then to start my
I know,
question?
right? I
Um,
know. I'm gonna get a necklace made up. Maybe I'll get some bracelets. I'll give them out to my team. It'll be great.
totally.
So,
Well, speaking of, I'd love to hear about how you hire, right? It sounds like
mhm.
StoneX has grown and scaled substantially. How have you changed how you hired over the years in terms of what you're looking for candidates wise, or even just the hiring process itself?
Yeah, it's a great question. Hats off to Darcy Zolpo, actually, from known her now for 25 years, and she really formed much of the foundations with how I think about hiring, how I think about engaging with the public, how I think about engaging with search professionals, either internal or external, and how to think about like what makes a good candidate, and how to think about what makes even a good team. And as you're taking steps as a hiring manager, how to see how to align against those types of things. StoneX has grown substantially. The teams that I run today, at one point were in the double digits, and now are well into the triple digits, and we're about to go through some work that will take that into four-digit numbers. And so, done a lot of hiring. It's been a tumultuous time, especially in IT over the last couple of years. And what's really important when you go through sort of these somewhat feast and famine cycles of either hiring or the general environment is you really want to have a couple of tenets that you stick with. First and foremost is really always going to be try and find excellence. Like you really want to find people who are experts in their space to the extent that you can. Uh, Show continued commitment. One of the key questions I usually ask a candidate is, you've been in the space a long time. What keeps you here, right? So you're talking about get a sense for people who are driven in a particular way, are really passionate about what they do, because generally they're very happy in the roles that they have. Um, the some of the things that we've had to change are moving to a global hiring model. That means as a hiring manager, you need to be fairly flexible in terms of your style. Think about local market issues, local market dynamics, local market cultures, all those types of things. So that's been someplace that I've had to grow as over the couple of years. And then again, this sort of tenets that I put out there are a little bit of team above self. I mean, that sounds a little high and mighty and sort of armed forces-y, but I will say that what we're trying to build when you're doing hiring is you're trying to build good teams. I'm a big believer in kind of the concept of friends in foxholes, how someone is going to behave in an urgent situation. The important is that what happens is people come together, that they don't start bifurcating, right? And in finance, which is a generally urgent place, right? If you are disconnected from the markets, you are legitimately affecting your wallet instantaneously. There can be urgency, and you really want to think as a hiring manager, are you constructing a group of people people that you can see in your mind's eye will come together to solve problems, solve issues. Because if you can see it in an urgent situation, you certainly can see it and request it and expect it on a day-to-day basis. So that's sort of some of the underpins of hiring. To some degree, I speckled in there a little bit of some of the changes I've had to go through in terms of hiring that are new relative to some of my experiences prior to StoneX, for example.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Especially now with the global workforce, there's
Mhm.
been a lot of discussions around what qualifies as the bar and
Mhm.
what is a cultural tenant versus a skills-based or values-based recruiting versus your standard,
Mhm.
the candidate answered the question, but the how they answer the question was more important than the what they answer the question with. So it's a really interesting discussion for sure. Um, Summer mentioned that your qualities of being transparent and decisive, right, as part of the introduction. Is there a story you can share about a time when you had to be incredibly honest, or perhaps sharing thoughts most people would kind of find it hard to hear, maybe as a line towards a successful
Mhm.
outcome?
Yeah. I've worked in the hedge fund space for a long time. Like, these are some people who are basically paid to get things done. And so you really need to learn to have a pretty decisive, clear, and pragmatic communication style and headspace. So, again, having been at this for a long time, really learned that transparency was just a key idea. And it's really better to go ahead and have a transparent conversation than not. You know,
Mm,
like, for the benefit of your own like listeners, maybe I'll kind of cut to the end, which is like what ends up being my headspace around doing these things. Because having been an executive, I've probably could have dozens of fairly similar, but the same story around had to sit down with candidate, have hard conversation. What I could do is sort of cut to the chase and sort of say, like, here are the things that I think about. One is plan your conversation. Like, these are not things to do in a spontaneous way. So, even if it's in the moment and you feel a degree of angst, you really feel like you want to execute, always stop and wait and plans your words carefully, because the ultimately the key is that there is clarity around the communication and there are positive outcomes that come from that communication at the end of it. And if you don't plan, and if you just do it as an ad hoc, either an aside in the middle of another meeting or you pull them aside, you're not going to actually achieve your outcome, because you're not clear-headed about what you want out of the conversation, and you're not thoughtful about your words to make sure that your words are heard. When things
mm,
are tougher, immediately people will start to close up. Like, they will start to try and justify. They will start justifying in their own head. They will start interrupting you to justify. They will do those natural defense mechanisms, which are completely understandable. But that's not really what you want when you have to do something that is more in the constructive vein. You want people to have open ears. You want them to hear your entire discussion thread. You want them to hear the observation and your recommendation. In order to do that, you really have to plan out that conversation. So anytime you're going to do something that is anything in the constructive vein, you really have to be kind of committed that it's a little mini project to prepare. It can be as simple as notes. Like, I mean, I tend to write things in the margin. So I'm a notebook person. Despite running a technology unit, I'm a hard pen and notebook person. I have stacks and stacks and stacks of them at home. But I sort of write in the margin, like, what are my sort of key items, and I keep it close to me to make sure that I have that conversation. I'm careful with my words. I try and commit to a degree of neutrality of the language choices that I make, so you can really focus on what's the observed issue and what's the desired outcome. And then again, you have engagement. You have engagement on both sides versus either immediately sending one person to the corner, or in the worst case, you actually both back into corners. And once that happens, the whole conversation becomes negative. I've screwed it up, like, for sure. And you absolutely do screw it up over time. The key is, if you do find yourself screwing up, actually just stop. Be like, you know what, this is actually not going where we want it, where I wanted to go, where I wanted to go. Let me go ahead and get myself together. Let me get my thoughts more clear. Let me schedule some time with you. Let me have that, take the next step. So that is the best advice that I can give for anybody who has to have some sort of constructive conversation.
thank you for that. I forget that you can just pause and say, let me come
Yeah.
back to this. That's a very powerful tool that you can really use in these situations. So thank you for reminding me. Uh,
Good.
Last question, I promise. What would you
Yeah.
do If you needed to fill a position quickly, but you weren't very confident in the available candidates in the pipeline.
So the best outcome is actually to never get yourself into that situation, right? Which is you really think about your workforce management pretty carefully so that you're not in that situation where you might potentially have it. But it has definitely come up, the idea of saying, do we think that this is out there? Or, coming off the last couple of years, it's been a dearth of candidates for certain roles. Think security, right? Cybersecurity is a great example where we went to market multiple times and we're just like, you just can't get them. Like the whole world is trying to get these exact same people. So versus our competitive landscape being finance, our competitive landscape is just any company at all. And so for a while there, we ran up against that, like just not seeing the candidates, as much as possible, at all. We're pretty good. And again, what you really need to do is kind of say like, okay, let me retrench, right? Do we have the ability to wait, like really actually just continue to look for exactly what it is that we went to market with, because we do have the benefit of being able to have some degree of time that goes with it, and really being honest with yourself on that. Most part, when like someone leaves, for example, and a role opens up, and it was not at your selection, it was at the candidate selection, so you're in kind of a, oh man, didn't expect this moment. The key is that you really decide like, how urgent is this? Most people kick right into the urgency. Oh my God, I got to go get somebody. And really what you need to be is thoughtful. You have to say like, actually, this is a great opportunity to rethink what exactly do I need? What was good about that particular person in the role relative to what we might go to market and get, versus just saying, hey, HR, send me the job spec, let's go back out there. Really know that there's, when you have those situations, oftentimes you're sad to see the person go, but they are opportunities to rethink. So if we end up, having a situation where we're out in market, we've done that thought, we've gone out, we've said this, and we're not getting anything either, again, from markets being tight. Then it becomes like, are we looking for the right thing? Like, are we trying to look for a needle in a haystack? Have we pull together, because we're a growth company, we may pull together like 5 different things we want to try and get, and we're like, super, we can totally get this in the market, and it's just not true. So, and growth companies and smaller growth companies will sometimes really want these people who are very broad, sort of opportunistic players up and down, and quite honestly, that's really hard to search for. So the idea is, okay, actually, can we narrow this to something that the market probably will give us an ability to hook into, change slightly how we're going to market, and then just put the things that you took out of that job specification into the interview strategy, which is how opportunistic, do we actually end up getting, how much opportunism maybe do we get in the candidate that we see that may be narrow in scope from an initial pull in, but they come across as being big thinking. They have examples of where they bent or changed or learned or, self-developed or been open to development that then gets you to the broader place that you might want. That it becomes a little bit of, let's get some people in the door and see if we can actually find the one that we can see growing into what it is that we originally needed. We try and be pretty, it is important to be introspective when you go to market and don't get a pulse, right? Like to be like, okay, there's a lot of tools these days, and there's a lot of great providers like Somer, who help you. Right. If we're really not getting a pulse, like let's be introspective and not think it's the market and think it's us, right? And come back and sort of say, okay, what have we done wrong? Have we not scoped the comp correctly? Which again, given the sort of frothy situation a couple of years ago, that ended up being kind of a big issue. Is it a tight space? Cybersecurity is a great example, super tight space. Or again, have we as a growth company been like, let's find that opportunistic person who could be anything, want to be a CFO, want to be a CIO, want to, slices, dices, and just being like, you know what, there just isn't a resume that anybody can find that is like that. And instead saying like, what are really the critical pieces? And then looking more on the softer side. And again, if you're using support such as a Somer, going back and saying, look, as you're looking at these candidates, here's some of the things we took out of the role in order to get a little bit more volume so we could do evaluation, but probe on this topic, probe on that topic, probe on this third one, so that we, can come back and say, okay, maybe we have an opportunity to actually grow a person. And, those actually end up being some of the funnest hires you get, like those that really, that you grow, that you help grow, because they're so grateful. You feel so good about it, as a manager. So sometimes actually that difficulty that you had at the beginning, you actually end up having a better outcome in the end from a longer term employee that you actually help grow, and then the organization feels good, they feel good, you feel good.
Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah, there's so much goodness here, Abby. Thank you for sharing all of this. What I love is how, from my side, what I see is someone who's like decisive and moves fast and, just you have the answer, your foot's on the gas, right? And all this. But when you're talking now and we're having this time to reflect, what I'm hearing is how reflective you are, how thoughtful you are, how much behind the scenes you're doing before you take action. And I think that's a big thing that the listeners who are listening to this can take away with is just, like how you're preparing before you have that conversation with the candidate. Like you're not winging
Yeah.
anything. And you're also self-aware during it. You can pause and even just being reflective before you kick off the search. And the other thing, I wanted to mention, which we didn't really talk about, you touched on it, but really hiring for teams and really being
Mhm.
thoughtful if someone does leave or you're making a change, or even if you're growing, just what does everyone bring? Like hiring for that collective goodness of the group and just being so
Yeah.
thoughtful about that versus just hiring this one role in isolation by itself and finding the best A player for that function, right? So
Yeah.
it's just so much thought so that you can then move quickly and go, go, go. And
Yeah.
yeah, all of that is
It's
awesome.
not as hard to put the thought in, as it might sort of sound, right? I mean, it sort of
Mm,
sounds like, okay, you got to sit down and really pontificate for an hour. You generally speaking can come to pretty quickly. What is it that we really need? What is it that I really want to tell our partners to in terms who are helping us with a search, that they need to stress. But the organization of thought ends up paying dividends, and the headspace, from where I come from, is HR of all ilks, no matter what function it is, from TA all the way through sort of employee support. They are partners. They deserve your preparedness. Like they deserve your preparedness in coming to the coming to the conversation with some preformed thoughts. I'll be honest, like I'm not always that good, but I then try and be very clear at the upfront. I've not had a ton of time to think about this. So, you're going to get a little bit of my first thoughts. And that means we may have some takeaways at the end. And like, I'm just letting you know up front.
mhm.
And that again also sort of facilitates a really good conversation because you're very even. You and your partner are in the same place in terms of what are the outcomes that you can get from that conversation. How good even those outcomes might be in terms of level of quality. Because again, if I'm coming to a conversation, and like I said, we're all guilty of it, not being able to be as prepared, the outcomes are probably not going to be as good either. This sort of spontaneous lightning from the sky, wow, it's amazing, is not true. But just not true. But in terms of thinking of working with you, for example, it was really important that we were aligned internally. The hiring manager and I had conversations around saying, what is it that we're trying to go for? My whole team knows I have fairly high expectations around when we bring people in. And a headspace I would give your listeners is, the candidate should be lucky to join you. Like you should be a company that comes to the table saying, we are a good company to work for. We're either a great opportunity for you to be a change agent, or we're a good company in terms of development. Whatever it is, figure out who you are as a company. But also, when you're making an offer to someone or bring them in, like you're asking that person to change their entire lives. Like you're asking them to change their manager, change their commute, change their times, change who they work with every day, and take that seriously. Like to really take it seriously. And if you look at hiring people as that you're asking someone to change their entire life for you, you do actually sit there and say, you know what, I should put 10 to 15 minutes into making sure that this is good. I should take 5 minutes to make sure that this is going well. I interview a lot of our candidates, service desk on up, and it came from words of advice that I got from a ex-CIO, which is, how many people do you hire in a year? I'm like, I don't know, 150, 200 people. He goes, for 250 hours of your time over the course of a 2,000-hour year or 2,500-hour year, is that not worth you making sure that you can get the outcomes that, your executives deserve? And I was like, you know what, freaking, you're right. And, I invested a lot in the idea of saying, let's make sure that, we do have the right bandwidth of people. With the amount we hire now, I don't do it as often, but, I put that same thing to my leads. I'm like, we do have a fairly robust process. And I warn our partners, all the time saying, I'm going to hold that bar in terms of the number of people they have to talk to. What are the objectives? But a lot of it is around like, take the fact that you're bringing someone into our organization very seriously. They are changing their lives. Your team will change. It is worth your investment. It's worth your time. So,
What a great way to wrap this up. And I'd love to end it with how we began. And thank you, Darcy, for introducing us. I have also
mhm.
I'm going to get her on the podcast. I've just learned so
Should.
much from her. Like even though like I've always been on this side of the fence, like when she was my client like a decade ago, like she just elevated my game. So
Yeah.
So
It
thank
comes
you,
with
Abby.
her longevity in a tough space. She's been everywhere that is any good. Like she has been there. So
Yes. Yeah, 100%. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to see you, and
you as
look
well.
forward to talking again. All right,
And
take care.
Zen, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, bye.